Hello, and thank you so much for joining me today. Why does American beer taste like water? Honestly, that's the kindest thing I've ever heard American beer compared to. Water? Usually people say piss. Or at least piss water. This is a video by The Good Stuff. Go check them out, link down below. I'm really excited to watch this video because people will be making fun of my American beer all day long, and I don't understand, you know? It's very refreshing, like a glass of cold water. But why does it taste like water?
American lager. Crisp, light, refreshing.
Hams.
It's as American as baseball and apple pie and Snooki and Abraham Lincoln's beard. And here in America, we sure do like our beer. We're ranked second in the world for overall beer consumption, an honor we've earned.
Really? Overall beer consumption. Now, is that taking into account, like, per capita, or? Because that's an important thing to consider. How many people live in the country?
By tossing back roughly 51 billion pints of suds every single year.
Apparently not.
And although there are a lot of options to choose from, the style of beer we drink the most, by far, is the traditional light American lager. Of course, not everyone else in the world loves American beer.
We find your American beer is a little like making...
To be honest, I mean, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I don't know what makes it a lager. Like, is this a lager? Michelob Ultra? Stupid question.
love in a canoe. It's close to water.
Very well-made beers. These are very high-quality beers, but they're kind of light on beer flavor.
This is Ray Daniels, founder of the Cicerone Certification Program in Chicago, longtime brewer and expert beer drinker.
And the main reason is because there's not that much malt in these recipes.
Yeah.
And the Germans have a saying that malt is the soul of beer, and there's not that much.
How do you say that in German, though? Malt is the soul of beer. See, that's why I can't. I know I was born in the right country, because even this, I had to acquire a taste for, like, Bud Light and Michelob Ultra, like the light beers.
Malt in these beers.
But how did a style of beer that's drinkable and refreshing, yet has no soul, get to be so popular? 5 reasons: German immigrants, prohibition, brewing technology, World War II, and the post-war consumer packaged goods economy.
Holy crap.
But I'm gonna get to that in a minute. Excuse me. Could I get a cool, refreshing lager, please?
Here is our beer list, categorized by country. Lagers are listed on the left alphabetically by varietal.
Guys, this is so random, but I have to point out, this guy looks like the Wheezy Waiter. Are there any OG YouTube viewers out there that know Wheezy Waiter? I mean, he looks like him, right? Kind of. Yeah, he looks like him. Is it? Wheezy Waiter, shout out to him. He's an OG YouTuber.
Just Coors, thanks.
Okay.
Paper cut.
I know that was super random. But
Why is that? I would say, like, for most of American history, this was the kind of beer we were drinking, right?
Well, it really has to do with brewing technology and the migration of German-speaking immigrants coming to the U.S.
I didn't know Germans had such a big influence on our beer.
Between 1850 and 1900, millions of German-speaking immigrants migrated to the United States. Prior to that, British-style ales dominated the beer industry, but the Germans wanted something different.
Wanted to make a nice, golden, clear, pale beer, because that was the style of beer in Germany at the time. But American barley, the stuff that grows here in the United States, is different than the barley that grows in Europe. And they couldn't make a clear beer with American 6-row barley because it has a higher protein content. The problem, they were very annoyed. They couldn't get clear beer.
I mean, I would be pretty annoyed if I couldn't get beer.
Absolutely. You know, it didn't look pretty the way it was supposed to.
Yeah.
So they figured out that if they took a low protein grain, like corn or rice, and mixed it into the recipe, that they'd get a lower protein content in the finished beer, and the beer would turn out clear. So that was the original reason. It was.
Good job, Germans. So we can actually thank Germans for American piss water.
It was not to make it cheap, it was not, anything else, but they wanted a nice, clear, golden beer.
The Czech-style Pilsner, which is a type of lager, quickly became the beer of choice. Breweries began popping up all over the place, many of which were owned and operated by German immigrants like Adolf Coors, Frederick Miller, Joseph Schlitz, Frederick Pabst Blue Ribbon, full name, and a soap maker named Eberhard Anheuser. The brewing industry in America flourished, and by 1873 the country had over 4,000 breweries. However, this golden age of golden lager would not last long. The boom in the beer industry was accompanied by a boom in other things associated with beer, like public drunkenness and domestic violence. Then some...
Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Whoa. That's a really cool typography.
Something happened in America that set the brewing industry back a few decades.
When the 18th Amendment passed in 1919, Prohibition in the United States had officially begun. The production, transport, and sale of alcohol became illegal, and the beer industry all but ceased to exist.
Wow, look at this footage. That's insane to see. That's so funny to think Prohibition was ever actually a thing of alcohol here in America. That's so dumb.
With the exception...
Maybe that's what people will think, like looking back on how, like, the prohibition of marijuana. That already is what people are thinking. It's just so, like, overblown and so silly. Like, people are going to do it whether or not it's prohibited or not.
Exception of a few industrious entrepreneurs.
When Prohibition was finally repealed in 1933, only a fraction of the...
Look at the size of that. I can tell this was imported. Like, this guy must be German. Look at that thing.
Beer manufacturers from the late 1800s remained, and that number continued to drop every year. Strict state laws combined with heavy government regulation made it difficult for smaller beer companies to survive, not to mention the fact that home brewing was still illegal. During World War II, grain was rationed in the United States, forcing beer makers to rely more heavily on adjuncts like corn and rice. This slowed the reemergence of smaller breweries, but allowed bigger, established breweries to flourish. After the war ended, America didn't need to ration anymore, and we began to adopt a more liberal approach to consumption.
And then the 20th century was pretty much a century of...
It was all downhill from there, huh? Now that's all we do is consume.
Consumer packaged goods in the United States. We had very narrow media outlets. When I was a kid, there were only 3 TV stations, period. I know, ancient history, right?
Yeah.
Everything got narrowed down to a very small number of brands with universal distribution throughout the country. It was true for soap, breakfast cereal, coffee was Folgers and Maxwell House. Everything got narrowed down to a very small number of consumer brands. And
guys, hold on. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense why this guy looks like the Wheezy Waiter. It's because he is. Wheezy Waiter, Craig Benzine. The host is Craig Benzine. Now I can finally go back to where we were, because that was bothering me this entire time.
Narrowed down to a very small number of consumer brands, and beer was no different.
Throughout the second half of the 20th century, the number of independent breweries dwindled as beer manufacturers merged and companies like Anheuser-Busch and Miller continued to grow. By 1978, the beer-making industry hit a record low, with only around 80 breweries operating in the U.S.
80?
America's
in
beer
the
got
entire U.S.
even more watered down when the big beer companies devised a brilliant strategy to sell more beer. Light beer.
I don't even know what makes a beer light. I never knew if it was the calories or the amount of alcohol in it.
Light beer from Miller. Everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Originally marketed unsuccessfully as a diet drink, light beers promised the same great taste, but with less filling, which basically just encouraged people to drink more. Miller Lite and Bud Light...
Less filling, so it's literally like light on your stomach.
Its advertising campaigns were hugely successful.
Obviously they are lower calorie, and I think a slightly less alcohol in them, typically. Not much less. Like 0.5% less.
and further cemented their dominance of the beer industry.
Unless you were one of the millions of Americans who enjoyed bland, watery beer, things were looking pretty bleak. But then a miracle happened. In 1977,
I am one of the millions that enjoy bland, watery beer.
Congress passed a small brewer tax credit, and in 1978, a bill was signed into law that finally made home brewing legal throughout the country.
Jimmy Carter signed home brewing.
He signed H.R. Leet into law. It's pretty cool. Shout out to anybody old enough to know that 1337 is late.
One of the other great things Jimmy Carter did.
Wow, what a great man.
Yeah, absolutely. Homebrewing became legal, and homebrewing really drove the craft brewing movement. It was really tough in the early days because there was no equipment. Nobody was selling supplies to these small breweries. You know, a small brewer might need 1,000 pounds of malt. And they call up a malt supplier, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll send you some malt. You know, how many train car loads do you need?" It's like, well, how much is a train car? 30,000 pounds. Like, can I get 1,000?
Yeah.
You know, click.
It started slow at first, but over the years, the number of small craft breweries began to steadily increase.
So what we're seeing
Interesting.
now, what most people think of as the craft movement, the modern one, or the second wave, really started in about 2003. There were craft brewers out there who'd been sort of sticking to their knitting and really, you know, cleaning up their game. And
It's weird seeing all the craft breweries and micro breweries here in America now. I mean, they've taken a huge chunk out of the market share of the big guys like Michelob and Bud Light. Yeah, half of what guys drink now, and ladies, well, mostly guys, is craft brewery stuff.
and getting things good.
Which I guess it's probably a lot cooler than Bud Light.
Good. A new brewery started being founded, and we've had this huge, upsurge of breweries. So that's 30 years of craft beer history in a nutshell.
No longer limited to the light lagers that Americans had been drinking for over a century, brewers can now experiment with a variety of styles and flavors, creating new recipes and borrowing from old traditions as well. In 2015, the number of breweries in America reached an all-time high at 4,269, surpassing pre-Prohibition numbers. Of course, at the same
Ever since I was born, it's just been going straight up. Look at that. That's a really funny graph.
At 4,200 years of mergers and acquisitions, the world's 5 biggest beer companies now control over 50% of the world's beer market. Although big beer continues to dominate, it does not seem to be slowing down craft beer, and we have
So American beer doesn't taste as much like piss water anymore, which is a beautiful thing. Ha ha! I mean, I still drink the American piss water, but a lot of people don't.
more options for beer consumption than ever before. This is truly a good time to have a beer.
Look at the darkness of that beer. Damn, Obama, that put some hair on his chest.
If you're of age and you drink responsibly, stay in school.
So what do you think? Do you enjoy craft brews? Do you think we're in a beer bubble
No.
that will explode at any time? Or are you
Well, Wheezy Waiter, it did not explode. 7 years later, people are still drinking their craft brews.
content to stick with the good old mass-produced American light lager?
Yes.
I kind of just like it all. Let us know in the comments. Last week we did a video all about the
That was a great video. Shout out to the Wheezy Waiter and shout out to the good stuff. I'm mostly just excited that I recognized him as the Wheezy Waiter. I'm just curious when the last time he uploaded was on this channel. 8 days ago. I'm going way back, guys. I'm going way back to the beginning just to prove that this is an OG channel. Whoa. This is actually really interesting. This is the dumbest side. Sometimes I get sidetracked, guys. But you can actually see throughout time, back then he was getting 25,000 views and his newest video had 100,000 views. That's pretty cool. So he went through a little valley in terms of popularity, and now he's back getting 100,000 views. That's awesome. See, back in these days, he was getting 100,000 views. This is 9 years ago. I mean, it's tough out there, man. Man, he's been doing it a long freaking time. 10 years. How much longer should I do this? I'm basically ruining my reaction video by doing this, but at this point, I'm committed. I think I could have just sorted by oldest. That's the sad thing. Yeah. Yeah, I sure could have. 16 years ago. Yep, that's as old as YouTube is. Thank you for watching. I don't think anybody is actually still watching after I just scrolled through a YouTube channel for 2 minutes, but I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.